Here, me.
Time to find what is the space inside my mind. Philosophy of nothing in plain sight. Something so familiar, so foreign. Forget to remember to forget. The same art, just a different medium. A moving canvas, a picture of myself. We like things little, but we love things big. Yeah, I grew out of it, and you just fit right in.
Now, here's a little story I got to tell.
We're thankful to be alive over here with episode number 45. This is Giants Amongst Us, where we share in the unique human experience, and it's where you're going to hear real stories that are told by real people. People just like yourself. If this is your first time tuning in, pull up a chair. Please do stay a while. It's good to have you on board. And when you're done with this episode, you can go to giantsamongustus.org, and there you can find past stories, past guests, talk about the ways that they transcended struggles, challenges, setbacks, and started to create changes and new realities for themselves, because that's what the show is about. It's to give examples and to share real life testimonies of how somebody can create changes in their life. So if you're not happy or satisfied with the way things are going, be inspired, be encouraged, be challenged. We're all works in progress. This is a constellation of imperfections, but we're striving for more over here. And may these stories and these testaments and these testimonies be a beacon of light to anybody in a dark spot right now. Know that you're worth it. Your life has value. Your life has meaning. And you're capable of great things. We just have to realize it. We just have to actualize it. We just have to want it. So I hope you guys are having a good one. Hope you guys are in good spirits. And if not, well, maybe this show can help you out a little bit. We've been enjoying some sunny days over here. Spring is just around the corner. Mother Earth is going through her cycles. We have the birds chirping, the flowers blooming, the trees are starting to fill in, and we're getting the garden ready. So it's a real treat, and it's nothing to be mad about. One more thing. The links are going to be in the show notes. There's going to be 3 links. And if you find value in what we're doing, if you appreciate these stories, which you can do free of charge to support the show, it won't cost you a dime, just probably a few minutes of your time. Go to one of those links. It'll send you to the website, giantsamongustus.org. It'll send you to Spotify. And the other link is for Apple. And what you can do there is you can either review the show, or you could rate the show, or you can do both. It's up to you, but if you appreciate it and if you find value in it, you can write a little review, send a few words off into the ether, good or bad, constructive criticism. We're open to everything. Or you can give it 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, whatever you seem fit. But what that is going to do, it'll do 2 things. The first thing it's going to do is to help this show, these stories, these experiences reach the ears of new listeners. And the other thing on the back end is for us over here. It'll help us improve the show, better it, and create an overall wonderful, enjoyable, and valuable experience. So with all that being said, let's talk some story. Today, Derek joins us, and he's got a story to tell.
As men, like, a lot of our purpose seems to kind of gravitate towards, what we're doing for our career. And that was my case. And so when that went away, it was like I was facing 2 different deaths. It was the death of my marriage and then the death of my career and purpose in life.
Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is Derek and his story. This is Giants Amongst Us, where we share in the unique human experience. And I am happy to introduce our guest for today, Derek. took time out of his day. He was flexible. We had some hangups, but we worked it out, stuck around. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Derek, you could have been doing anything right now. You could have been anywhere, but here we are having a sit down, sharing a conversation. Appreciate it. How's it going?
Doing well. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now. And we were talking about before the show, these things we're kindred spirits, and that these conversations are some of the best parts of our week. So I'm happy to be here.
That's right. And hopefully it translates over and to the other side, whoever's listening. I'm sure that it will, and it's going to be that extra juice in everybody's battery pack today.
I hope so.
Yeah, right on. So Derek, just for starters, I always like to get a little background on the guest. So if you don't mind, can you share some of or a bit of your background and how it was for you growing up?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said earlier, I'm a '90s baby, born in the early '90s there. So, grew up with 4 brothers. I'm the oldest, and so it was kind of a hectic household. Lots of
All boys.
all boys. Lots of sibling rivalries. Lots of bruises and nicks, and everybody survived though. So, went to college for broadcast journalism, but I tell everybody I used all my, what are they called, those little electoral classes or what, electives, used all those on different journalism classes. Only took one blow off class, and that was bowling. So I wound up being able to go and do any job that I wanted to after college. I accepted a job as a sports writer, and I grew up in Missouri. This job took me out to Oklahoma, so not too far away from my family. Immediately became the sports editor there. After that, I moved back into Missouri, pretty close to St. Louis, and worked at a paper that's closed down now, but it was the Waynesville Daily Guide. And I wound up winning, it was over 10 different awards for my writing, lots of them first place and second place awards for sports features and news stories. And what I found during that time is that I realized the reason I was probably winning those awards is I wrote a little bit differently. It was less about the X's and O's, though I was fascinated by those things, but more about the people underneath those jerseys. So fast forward a couple years, I was going through a divorce, and she moved back to where her family lived. And I was forced with a decision because she got the education address. And I know this, I don't know how family law is out where you live, but in the United States, it's still kind of messed up, where it's a lot of financial decisions as opposed to personal decisions there. So wherever she lives is where my daughter goes to school. And they told me I could either get visitation rights or I could keep my 50% custody of my daughter if I moved to where she was. There was no decision there. I wanted to keep that relationship with my daughter. And so I moved. Where I moved to, there was no sports journalist opportunities. So I had to decide how I was going to rebuild my life from there on. And it was a difficult thing for me. My career life at that time, especially when I was just winning awards, I'd gotten called by a sports writer who covered the Kansas City Chiefs, which they just lost the Super Bowl yesterday. So shout out to all those fans. Keep your head up. But the guy that covered the Chiefs at the time actually called me when I was winning my first award, and he told me he had read the story that got me first place. He was like, "This is incredible." And so it felt like I was on, a 45-degree angle pointed up as far as, career growth and everything. And so as men, like, a lot of our purpose seems to kind of gravitate towards, what we're doing for our career. And that was my case. And so when that went away, it was like I was facing 2 different deaths. It was the death of my marriage and then the death of my career and purpose in life. But as I started to be faced with some of my mental health struggles, when I was working, I was able to, kind of put them on the back burner and distract myself with my work. But once that went away and I was, doing 9 to 5s that I wasn't used to doing, those thoughts started creeping in and really taking a control over my life. And so that's when I reached out to a family friend of mine. I call her my aunt. I just said, I know you went through a divorce. Hers was, on paper looked a lot worse than what I was dealing with. And somehow she remained bubbly and very loving. And at the time, everything I looked at, I was just like, man, I hate all this, And I was like, how do you do that? And she, same night, drove up. It was a 3-hour drive from where she was at and sat with me and talked with me. And that was the first time I really looked at my life and I was like, oh, what I'm dealing with right now is that mental health stuff that everybody talks about. And that's when I first started trying to take care of myself in those ways. So that's kind of catching up to a few years ago. So we can take that conversation wherever you'd like.
No, I appreciate you sharing all that. And it seems like the big hits for you emotionally, mentally was the divorce for one, and then a sense of identity that's lost in a way. Your whole world is wrapped around what you do and what you love, and to lose that and to start from scratch, were those like the two big components that put a hit on you mentally,
Yeah, for
emotionally?
sure. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And so I was putting all this pressure on myself of I had to succeed. And I had to do that for myself and then to show, my youngest brother at the time hadn't reached, college age yet. So I was trying to show him, here's what you do. This is how you do it. Maybe not going into journalism like I did, but that there's a way out. There's a different way to live. A lot of my family, and there's nothing against blue collar workers, but that's all any of my family at the time was really doing. And I had identified in myself, I was like, this stuff doesn't make sense to me. you know, when I was a junior and senior in high school, I was taking dual credit classes. So for several hours of my day, I was actually attending college and I was trying to learn auto mechanics because I'd always loved cars. And it went all right for a little while. But in the last year that I was there, they were starting to get a little bit more advanced in like how engines work and diagnosing them. And no matter how hard I worked, it just never clicked in my brain, and so
Hmm.
I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do now? And that year of high school, we were doing really well on the football team. And I was a big video game guy. So I was playing Madden and
Hmm.
stuff. And I was always fascinated by sports. So I was like, I know I'm not going to go pro, pretty sure of that. So how do I stay in this world? And I loved reading. I was reading like Bill Simmons back when he used to be a writer. Gosh, Peter King.
Sports writers.
Oh yeah, all sorts of sports writers. And when I first got to school, I'd go straight for the computer lab and pull up, ESPN or all those different sites and look at who was doing what, and loved reading the behind the scenes stuff of these players. And that's where I got the bug for sports journalism. But now that I'm older, I can see that really what I love at the center of all that is storytelling. I feel like we learn so much of what to do in life and, learn about each other through storytelling.
Yeah. Were you able to since you were a sports writer, did you have access to go to the games?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you're a big NBA guy, but at the time,
Even on the field?
oh yeah.
Oh, right on. Okay.
At the newspapers I was working at, I was mainly covering high school athletes, but especially where I lived there just south of St. Louis, I covered a lot of NBA talent there. Two of them right now is OG Anunoby, who I think is still on the Toronto Raptors, and then Boston Celtics Jason Tatum.
Hmm.
Got to cover games with both of those guys.
Wow.
So very thankful for that. When I was interning, I got to cover some college teams in the area. So it's pretty cool. The access is unbelievable, and the seats too when you're not down on the field. But yeah, definitely.
Best in the house.
Yeah.
Man, so I have to commend you on that because this is your pride and joy. This is something that you love. This is who you are, who you were. But to give all that up for the sake of being with your daughter. I have to tip my hat off to you, even though some would say, well, that's what a father should do. But I'm saying that because of the fact that there's a lot of mothers or fathers that, unfortunately, they don't have that desire to want to sacrifice, to want to maybe lead a healthier life. And it ends up affecting the relationship between their son, their daughter. And so just the fact that you were willing to sacrifice all that so you can be with your daughter, was that something that throughout the time when you were dealing with the depression and the loss, because that is a thing that it's a sense of grief. We talk about the decease of our family members or loved ones, but then also you have different losses. You have loss of identity, you have a loss of a career, you have loss of a relationship, of a spouse, and even loss of your physical attributes. When you start getting older and you're like, my God, I wish I was young again. And so there's a lot of things that people can grieve about and they don't get over, and so that can affect you in a lot of different ways. But yeah, no, I really just wanted to say that, man, that's honorable and respectable that you were willing to put all that aside so you can be with your daughter.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. There really wasn't a question early on, whenever that was when I was made to know that, I was going to have to make that decision. I immediately was like, well, I'm going to have to go then.
Yeah, even though it's unfortunate that it had to be in those kind of circumstances. I mean, there's no middle ground that you can do, but it's like, I guess you have to bite the bullet, huh?
Right. Yeah. Ever since that little girl was born, she had me wrapped around her finger. And I still remember when we found out we were going to have her, and I didn't, cry. I wasn't like, oh crap, what do we do now? I just immediately hugged my now ex-wife. I hugged her and was like, I'm going to take care of this and take care of our daughter. And, there for a long time, I was the only one working there. She had a lot of complications with the pregnancy and everything, but I never once did I ever think, I would trade that for anything. And I don't know what that was in me. Growing up, I look back at my relationship with my parents, and there were some things there, we all want to do better for our kids than our parents did for us. And so I just remembered I wanted to really develop a relationship with her. And my gosh, to this day, she's about to be 13 this year, and we do everything together. We love going to the movies. At home, she comes to my room to watch Netflix, and I play some of her little kiddie games with her, Roblox and stuff like that. Don't know what I'm doing, but by gosh, I'll play it with her.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah, we could definitely use more parents or just more people that are in the lives of our children, because eventually, of course, these are the ones that are going to be leading, they're going to be taking care of, they're going to be servicing everybody else. That's a great thing to see and hear. Wanted to ask you, when you were dealing with all of what you were dealing with psychologically, the financially, having to start over and everything, like you said, it was definitely taking a toll on you mentally, and you had to talk with your aunt. Was she kind of just bringing all this to your attention, like this is what's going on, or she just trying to understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling, or she's seeing you? I guess she's seeing your demeanor and she's seeing your behavior, and she's just kind of trying to let you know that she's there for you? Or how was that conversation like, or what was that relationship like?
Yeah, I just, like I said, she had been through a really terrible
Oh,
divorce.
she can relate then.
Her Oh yeah, yeah. Her husband left her right after their son was born. So I asked her, I'm like, how did you go? How'd you keep going? Like, my marriage wasn't perfect. It seemed like it was, going downward there for a while, but I was literally just about to prepare to, talk to her about marriage counseling or, find ways to fix things. And instead, we wound up splitting up. And so I asked her, I was like, how is it that yours, when you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, some of I don't want to share all the details of what happened with her and her husband, but it was bad. And so I was like, how do you are the most bubbly, happy person I've ever met. And you went through all of these things. Like, how did you come out on the other side, to be the person you are today? And so she talked to me, it's about, reworking your perspective and figuring out, okay, this is over. What do I do next? And I knew that the things that I was dealing with, and I had been dealing with for a long time, my anxiety and depression, which I didn't have the words for then, but she had worked at a behavioral health company here in town. And so she had the words to give me, this is what it is you're dealing with. And, she recommended that I go to therapy. And once I was there and started figuring all of those things out, I knew, I had actually been dealing with suicidal ideation before I had my talk with her. And so once I found out, that's not necessarily what everybody goes through. I knew that I was going too far without healing. And so I knew then that I had to work on myself to show my daughter that, no matter what you face in life and how you're feeling, that, you can continue forward. And I also knew I had some work to do with, figuring out what my identity was. I had thought, oh, it's your identity is what you do for a living. And that's not the case. Who you are shows up in what you do for a living, but it's not your whole identity. And once I figured that out, it was a little bit easier to, now I'm able to say, oh, what I really enjoy is storytelling. You can do that anywhere. And I also was able to start looking at some of the mental health struggles that I was having. I was able to look for the silver linings in those things. Both of us, like, we hopped on this call and immediately connected because, at least in my eyes, the things that I struggle with actually give me empathy for others and an understanding or an ability to understand others. So I probably ventured way off of what your question was there.
No, no, no. You covered a lot of ground. You got into, yeah, actually more than what I was asking. It was pretty much just the conversation because I was curious what that looked like or how that kind of sparked your move towards wanting to figure out what's going on with you or even look in a direction where you can find maybe some help. And you said that therapy was a big part of it, and also just you seeing the fact that she was able to go through whatever she went through, all that she went through, and still on the other end, she's bubbly, she's positive. Like, what is it? What's the secret? What did you do? Let me have some of that juice. Let me have some of that
Right.
soup. And so that's something that's also kind of ties into why I think these type of conversations are important to share and expose other people to, because this is something that is a good reference point for someone who's down and out. They feel as if they have no hope. They feel as if they're
Yeah.
just in a dark pit, and it just keeps getting further and further away from where they would like to be, and they seem to not have any reason or any drive to want to do anything. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, and for you, it's you were actively, I guess maybe your daughter was a big part of you wanting to get well, to be there for her. But there had to also be something eventually where it was inside of you and you started to see, like, I'm also worthy
Mm.
of something better, and getting well and being well and doing good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely my daughter. So the suicidal ideation I talked about, I dealt with that a little bit in middle school.
Were they protruding, or was it something that was constant, or they would come here and there and sometimes heavier than others?
Yeah, it was here and there. So the first time I can remember is back in middle school. Was dealing with some bullies, and then the goofy middle school relationships type stuff.
Uh-huh.
And one of the most vivid memories I have is my mom coming across my journal and found that I'd written in there that I wanted to die and things like that. And I remember times where I would literally go in my room and shut the lights off and just lay in the floor because I felt like, and what I didn't know now is that it was panic attacks, but I felt like, just super scared, unsure of everything, and my heart would start racing. And then I didn't really suffer panic attacks in between, my teenage and at the time of my divorce, I was 26, I think. But I would experience different forms of anxiety. But after the divorce, the days that my daughter was not there, I felt like life was super pointless. The panic attacks had come back, and I would just go through not fits of rage, more so I would just feel like I'm self-destructing. And so there was one day where I reached out to my parents and I told them, I'm going to give my daughter back to my ex, and I'm going to end it. And no sooner was I saying those things, I was like, actually, why don't you come up here and, stay with me and, help me calm down. And that's when I realized there was not going to be anybody else that was going to be able to show my daughter what it would be like to overcome these things. And that's what really propelled me into going ahead, and I booked a session with a therapist, and I have been in and out of therapy a little bit, but pretty much there hasn't been a year that's gone by where I didn't have, a long-standing relationship with a therapist. And I go regularly to this day, just about every other week. The meditation stuff came a little bit later, but yeah, that's one of my biggest tools for sure.
With the therapy, what was it for you that was a big help? Was it just having an ear so you can go ahead and talk about things that were, tucked in deep down inside, and you didn't have an outlet for it? Or what was it for you that helped with the therapy?
It was partly that, but with my depressive thoughts, I'm way too close to the problem, right in the center of it all. That I think sometimes our depressive thoughts are egotistical and make everything about us. I'm worried about what other people think about me, or yeah, I just needed a 30,000-foot view of what was going on. I needed somebody else to tell me, give me ways to think about my problems from a different vantage point. And that's been the biggest help for me. I would say if you don't have a therapist that's able to do that, if they are just there to be an ear, that is definitely helpful. However, am I able to cuss on here?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of my psychiatrists said something the other day that like really, really made sense to me. She was like, you need a therapist that's on your ass. And I was like, I kind of laughed at it, but I was like, no, she's right, because the ones that I have left, they were just an ear. And I have told several of them, like, I don't want to come in here and this just be, a complaining fest. Like I need somebody who is able to say like, oh, you're catastrophizing again, or you have too negative of a mindset. And that actually wasn't I was about to say it was a therapist that said this, but it was actually a personal trainer that I had hired years later. He caught me one night. We would get on these Zoom sessions and kind of talk about how things were going, and we would have kind of a group meeting on there to help build each other up. And he caught me one day. He was like, everything you say after I am is something negative. I am bad at this. I am, whatever. And he was like, you have to stop doing that. And that was one of the biggest things that helped me. Was he was like, if you say I am, stop and make sure what it is you're about to say is positive or at least constructive and not simply negative. Because my whole life has been that. I had constant, negative outlooks on life, on myself. I have a perfectionist mindset. And so anything that I don't succeed at, I immediately consider it a failure and not something that I can build from. And that's been the biggest shift in my mindset.
Is the negative self-doubt or the negative self-talk?
I've really reshaped the way that I talk about myself and the way that I view the struggles that I have in life, because I didn't ever realize what is that, the yin yang logo. I never understood what that meant until it sounds silly, but a couple of years ago, when I really realized what that meant. And, there can't be any light without dark. There can't be success without
Right.
struggles or failures, because those failures are simply teaching moments.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Me included. I'll put myself in the bunch is the self doubt, the negative talk. There's a lot of different reasons for it, but just being a perfectionist or having too high of a standard, or just the fact you don't want to miss the mark and have people around you, point the finger, or there's a lot of different reasons for why we do that. But that's a big key. And I like that you said that this is something that you're working on, because this is also something that I'm really trying to be more conscious of and more mindful of, is what I'm telling myself and what I'm feeding myself. That there's a real good book, James Allen's As a Man Thinketh, So He Is. I think that's the name of it. But yeah, it really is. Your mind is a garden. Whatever you give it, it's going to yield. So it doesn't care if you're giving it good or if you're giving it bad, but whatever you give it, it's going to yield. And so you have to be mindful of the things that you're thinking on, meditating on. You spoke about meditation, you're imagining, you're entertaining upstairs, because eventually it manifests itself in the real world with the people that you even associate with, the things that you do, your behavior, your habits. And it really starts from within, inside. And that old upstairs chatter sometimes
Yeah.
could be detrimental.
Yeah, for sure. Another book I would recommend on that topic, and the one that I think it was the first one that was recommended to me in regards to negative self-talk, is No Mud, No Lotus.
Okay, I never heard
Yeah,
that. Yeah, that sounds like a good.
yeah, it is incredible. So obviously it talks about like you can't have a lotus flower without planting it in the mud.
That's
So
right.
yeah, I can't recommend that book enough, and it's very easily read. It's fairly short, so anybody out there that
Practical, huh?
struggles with that, oh yeah, yeah, it's super practical.
So you had the therapist that you're still, to this day, you say weekly, you speak with, and they've been a very good help. And one of the things was the fact that they give you that outside perspective, because you need somebody who's not in the mix, in the thick of it, someone on the outside looking in, and they can kind of give you a different angle and see things differently, and that is helpful. I'm curious, because I know another ingredient for you, we spoke a little bit about offline, was the meditation, and how you came to understand that and appreciate it and apply it to your own life.
Yeah, there's this, and they sponsor my podcast. I love them to death. But I was working for this company called Two Oddballs Creative, a digital marketing company in Missouri. And one of the co-owners there went to college with me, and we quickly became friends while working together. And he saw a lot of the stuff that I was going through, and we had a lot of deep talks similar to this. And he told me about this guy named Sam Harris, who has this meditation app, which you can get for free, by the way. And it's more of a, trying to think of the best way to say this, but he's very intellectual. And so he's not for everybody. Sometimes it sounds like he likes to smell his own farts a little bit too much, but he took away that feeling that, meditation's like that woo woo type stuff, that it's not real, that it doesn't actually work, because I had tried it before and struggled mightily. I would get frustrated when thoughts would creep in while I'm trying to meditate. And it's not so much that meditation is meant to, you don't want to go in with the intent of, I'm not going to have a thought, because you're going to fail. We're all going to have those thoughts. The thing that works for me is when I'm meditating, I will let myself off the hook in those times. I just say, oh, I'm thinking about this, and I let go of it. And the saying is to imagine it as clouds passing through the sky, or a leaf that, floats by on the river, and not to become too attached to those things. And once I got that out of him, it was like off to the races. I fell absolutely in love with it. Even in the times, like there are going to be times where you sit down to meditate and you're just constantly bombarded by thoughts. I think our life these days moves super fast. We're constantly inundated with things that grab at our attention. So I feel like nowadays it's like harder than ever to kind of have a slow train of thoughts. And that's what I struggle with the most, is racing thoughts. And so I started listening to him. That was, let's see, it's 2025 now. I had to just look at the calendar. So I've been meditating for about 5 years. And I just recently, this last year, decided that I was going to try to obtain my meditation teaching certificate. And because I reference it on the podcast a lot, I tell everybody that I know who struggles with severe anxiety about it. And finally, I'm like, I think, I had watched too many people leave those conversations and not go do it. And so I'm like, maybe they just need somebody that can talk about it in a little bit different way, talk about it in a more real way. Cause I listen to a lot of self-help podcasts or mental health podcasts, and a lot of them, it just seems like they're not real. They don't talk like you and I are right now. They seem to be talking down, as opposed to somebody that may be in a peer support group or something, like you're on the same level and can talk about things in layman's terms. And so that's kind of what led to me going. And I think I'm about 2/3 of the way through. So hopefully later this year I'll have that, and that can be something that I offer my friends and the people in this area.
5 years, that's a long stretch. That, and you, when you practice it, because you said in the beginning you got frustrated. I think there's people out there can relate and understand. I know I'm one of them, because there was a time when I was doing this on the side, this mindfulness course. It was just one of these free courses you could take online, and then one of them was the meditation, and just to give yourself a quiet space, sit down and to be with your thoughts, be with yourself, be with the feels, be with your feels. And like you said, because of everything being so fast paced, and we're bombarded, billboards bombarding us with advertisements, with news headlines, with articles, it's really a challenge. And I think it's really, that makes it evident that it's more important than ever to get well, to be well, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. And so that's one huge tool. But just the challenge that it really is, just to allow 5 maybe minutes of your day away from everything, and to just be by yourself. But for you, I was saying all that to say, when you were struggling in the beginning and you were just getting frustrated, what was it that made you pick it back up again and try it again? Did you hear something that kind of clicked and you said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and give it one more shot?
Yeah.
How did you not just throw the towel in completely?
So, well, one, it was everybody that I was listening to at the time, because I got, and this is something I want to tell people, is like, I had like 12 freaking self-help books on my nightstand. I had dozens of podcast subscriptions. Like, you got to be a little bit careful with that, because that's gonna make you give up, right? Like, there's so many. I felt like every time I'd go to bed and I'd look over there, I'm like, oh my god, I haven't finished reading that. Like, and there was too much input. But something that somebody said did make me. I don't know if I had ever really thrown in the towel. I definitely went stretches without meditating, but regardless, I noticed at some point, regardless of how quote unquote bad my session was, that I did feel better when I was done. And what the saying that really got me back into it and really helped put everything in perspective, and I can't remember who said this, but they talked about our emotions as almost like our body is a ship, and the emotions that you experience are the crewmates trying to tell you something. And that's definitely what I feel like my anxiety is at times, is my crewmates telling me like, hey, don't forget, like, iceberg ahead, adjust your rudders or whatever it is. I've never been the captain of a ship, but, or it's reminding you of a goal that you have for yourself. And once I had that perspective, that was, like I said earlier, when I have a thought, I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about this again, or there's that thought again, or whatever, and letting it go. But throughout, one thing that I've found helpful is following a meditation session. If something came across that really struck a nerve with you in some way is to journal that and kind of ponder on that thought throughout the week, anytime you get a few minutes. Because one thing that had been coming across my mind a lot in the early or the late 20 teens and into 2020 was, so when I moved after my divorce, the first job that I was able to get was washing cars for $8 an hour. And I have my degree. I had good grades in school. I don't have a criminal record. There's not on paper, there should be no reason why I can't get a job. But to this day, when I apply to part-time jobs, I don't get them, either because they say I'm overqualified, or I've had one guy go, "You don't want to do this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I need money." So like, please. But I was able to get a good job in marketing with that Two Oddballs creative company. However, I was still with meditation on medication, going to therapy. I was having deep, dark depressions. And even though I had told myself that, I was going to keep going for my daughter, I was starting to have suicidal ideation again. I was just able to simply recognize that and tell myself, that's not what you want. That's just a thought that you're having. But I would tell my therapist about it. And the one that I had at the time simply kept recommending medication. And I'm not telling people not to take their meds. However, if you continue to have these types of thoughts and emotions, there's probably something going on there. And for me, it was that I had never found my purpose after, or at least in my career life. I had decided then that my purpose was to live a life, that, I would be proud to show my daughter. Like when she grows up, she always said, Dad kept going and kept seeking what it is that he is happy, he would be happy with in this life. And so one thought that had kept coming across my mind in meditations or when I would talk to friends is that I wanted to get back into some sort of creative outlet. And one of those things was to start a podcast. And however, I kept finding reasons why it wouldn't be successful, why I wouldn't enjoy doing it, how I would always come up with some reason why it wasn't going to work out. And that eventually cost me my job with that company. I got so depressed and so down that I wasn't creating work to the standards that they know that I'm capable of. And unfortunately, Missouri's what they call in the States is an at-will employment state. So they can pretty much let you go for any reason. And they did it in a very kind manner, since, he's a friend of mine, and his wife, who co-owns the business with him, had become a friend of mine. And so they didn't just outright let me go. They kind of weaned me off on the hours, so to speak. And throughout that time, I was, flailing around, like, what am I going to do now? And I finally decided, if I don't start this podcast, it's never going to happen. And so I started then planning everything out. And once I got back on my feet, I started acquiring the equipment to do this, and finally started it last year. And they built the website for me for free. And the rest is history.
That's a great story of how someone can turn it back around. Even though you get knocked off the horse, but getting back on it or having the will, sometimes the why is somebody else. In that case, it was your daughter, and being there for her and showing her, being an example of what somebody is able to do, capable of doing, and to have that positive light that she can always reference as she grows and becomes an adult later on in life. So that's great to have. With meditation, what do you think is the main challenge with some people with wanting to try meditation, or just writing it off as it not being something? Because of course some people are going to find something that works for them, and something that doesn't work for them. And so this is really about exploring and being open to different ideas. But what do you think is a big challenge for some people? Is it just that first step of getting frustrated because of the thoughts that are constant, and the constant chatter that's upstairs, and some have a hard time shutting it off, or dealing with it, or getting past it.
Yeah, so the couple people I've asked this question pointedly, just like, why don't you listen to me? One of them literally said that they didn't think they could be alone with their thoughts, which is valid. And so I would, definitely, if that's your biggest fear, I would definitely recommend therapy first. But with for myself, because I had gotten to a point where I was like, I'm willing to try anything. Like I was talking to some some out there folks and tried psychedelics and everything. But for me, it seemed to be that I constant like, I guess with the thoughts that, the racing thoughts and, the way that I was trying to ignore them prior, through video games or, drugs or anything like that, I constantly felt like I needed some sort of stimulation. So whenever you sit down to meditate and you remove all of that, you kind of feel itchy or something, and then the other thing is that there's no goal. My goodness, that really that caused me issues to start. There's no you won. There's nothing that you receive when you finish. There's seemingly no point to it. And so you really have to just be okay with just sitting with yourself and watching thoughts go by and almost be bored. And people cannot, like, speaking for myself, like I cannot handle being bored a lot of times until, hopefully someday, when I keep meditating, I'll be all right being bored again. But I think what helps me is I grew up in a time where we didn't have cell phones. We didn't, we had 3 or 4 channels on the television. So if there was crap on, I would go outside and fling sticks around, or, I used to actually, I was talking to my cousin about this the other day. I lived, they've paved it now, but back in the day, the road outside the house I'm sitting in right now was a gravel road. And they would have, I don't know if other places around the world have what's called a road grader or not, but they go down and they have a blade that smooths out that gravel road. And they would also they would move the blade around so it would dig a ditch on either side, and it would unearth all these rocks. And so sometimes when I had nothing better to do, I'd walk down the road and dig out cool rocks that I found in that ditch. And so,
Mm.
I have a memory of being bored. And so I think sometimes that I'm able to sit with that feeling a little bit easier than somebody that's grown up with a computer in their pocket. So I know that's the case for a couple of my friends. I've shared that story with them, and they're like, "No way, no way am I, going to be fine with walking around picking up rocks." But I love going hiking and things like that. So taking away different stimulus, is effective for me.
That's a big part of it too. The age of distraction. That's what we're living in. The age of distraction. Just pick your poison. There's so many things that could distract us, and we distract ourselves willingly. But I think, like you just said right now, it's taking away that stimuli. A lot of I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose anything, but I think it's pretty fair to say that a lot of this extra anxiety, these fears, these worries that us as people are dealing with, us as a society are dealing with, is coming from this extra stimuli, whether it's us looking at somebody else's life, wishing we had that, thinking we need this. And so we're comparing ourselves to this person and that person. And then you have all these rumors of wars, and the sky is falling, and the bomb's going to drop. And oh my God, this country is against that. So everything on the outside is it's draining the life out of us, and it's all these extra worries of what if, what can be, look at this, I need that. And if that is just removed, aside from the medication, but if that is just removed, if we're mindful of what we're consuming, not just physically but also mentally, that can also help with a lot of the anxiety we're feeling and a lot of the fears that we're having and a lot of the worries that are troubling us. And it's going to take some sacrifice. You have to be willing to maybe be bored or just get away from it. You can just compare it. That's really something that, and I do this all the time. I talk with my wife about it. I'm like, just compare, do a little experiment on yourself and take a walk through the forest, take a walk outside, just get out in nature, do that for 30 minutes or so, and then track, journal, write, just take note, a mental note of how you feel after that, and then compare that to you being on your smartphone, doom scrolling, or just zombie scrolling, or whatever it is that you do on Instagram or TikTok, and do that for 30 minutes, and then now track how you feel, what you're going through, and compare it. There really is a huge difference to those two different activities. And like you said, this is something that's missing, and it's something that's needed. And I think it can be a big ingredient to help people with some of these things that they're struggling
Hmm.
with.
I also, taking it back to meditation for just a second, probably to start out with, you should probably try the traditional, sitting and focusing on your breath type meditation. However, once you feel like you have, like, not that you went through X amount of minutes, which, taking it back to something you said about the 5 minutes, there's a doctor out there, Amisha Jha, who does, what is her podcast called? But she wrote a book on mindfulness and meditation, and she found through scientific studies with military members that 12 minutes a day was all you needed to receive the benefits that she was tracking, which is growth in your gray matter and your prefrontal cortex. And they reported less anxiety. So it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time out of your day. But there's also different forms of meditation. One of those is walking meditation. And I have done that. And that's one of my favorite. Like, you just walk around, and after you connect with your breath, then you start walking around, and you can look at, like, I live out here on a farm, so I'll look at the different trees, I'll look at the grain that's coming up, and really, like, look at the differences in things, the shapes, the textures, the colors, really zero in on those things. And it's one of my favorite ones to practice. And it's the physical, walking around, that's always going to help you. Exercises, there's countless studies that show that exercise isn't, just super beneficial to our physical health, but our mental as well.
Yeah, that's right. I've read a lot of stories about how also, like, when you're walking and you're engaging in something mindfully, you're taking a stroll, or you're observing the nature around you. That also the subconscious comes alive, and a lot of these creative juices in that inner man, the inner woman, the inner world that we have inside of us, it just blossoms and opens up. And there's a lot of old thinkers, old scientists, old intellectuals that they can be laboring over a problem, over something that they're trying to figure out, or something that they're working on, and they pull away from that. They go take a walk in nature. They go take a walk, and a lot of those times is when the answer comes to them. It's like they give that space for the subconscious to kind of, now they turn off the conscious mind. They've wrestled with this problem, they struggled with it, and sometimes in dream, sometimes out about with nature, or being mindful of your surroundings, or even in meditation, just being alone with self and allowing whatever to come to surface, and not suppressing anything, but just being.
Yeah, and you hear a lot of people too. What was the number one place that people talk about, like, having good ideas? They talk about, I had that idea in the shower.
Yeah.
Well, why is, because that's the one place they can't take their phone, or
You're
you
alone
know
for the most
yeah, they're
part.
alone with their thoughts. And that always cracked me up. After, I got into meditation, I thought about that and I was like, holy smokes. Like it was right there the whole time, being alone with your thoughts. And you're right. I love going on walks whenever I feel like I have a creative block of some sort. I just get up, walk outside. It's cold right now, so it kind of sucks, but there's still, I do love, how the landscape changes whenever things freeze over and looks like a lot of death to some people. But I love like whenever it ices and you get to see like how that coats different things and makes things shine. But yeah, getting out and just walking, like that's where all my best ideas have come from. Like there's a few parks nearby, and there's been several times where I take just a pen and paper. Where I used to live, I could walk straight to a park from my apartment, and I would just take a pen and paper. I would leave my phone at home and walk all the way out there. It was about a 20-minute walk, and sit down in the park and just jot out different show ideas or, whatever it was I was working on for that actually makes me money. It's now I'm not making all my money off my podcast, that's for sure. But uh, it's just something about it, like, yeah, being alone with self, because outside of all the mental health benefits of meditation or, simply just being alone with yourself, think about all the things that we are told that we want, or the goals that are set out, seemingly being set out for us on social media, the keeping up with the Joneses or whatever it is, consumerism. Those things are pulling us away from the things that we actually want in life. When you think about people, well, I forget who it was that wrote a book about, they would sit with people who are on their deathbed and they would talk to them, and they're like, they never bring up the things that are sold to us, like through commercials or celebrities or whatever. It's never the things that we're chasing right now that they bring up. They wanted more time with family. They wanted to ask that girl out. They wanted to go for that promotion, whatever. Like they had actual goals that they wanted to achieve. And those were the things that they looked back on and wanted more. They didn't want more time watching whatever the heck is on Netflix right now. They didn't. And I'm not saying like I didn't just sit and watch a football game for 4 hours yesterday,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
someone was with me. Like, so
I know. We're not talking like we're holier than thou. I mean, I could say that just a couple weekends ago, I was on a Netflix binge with
oh
the
yeah,
Squid Games 2, and I watched the whole series. I'm like, my God, I said I'm gonna watch 2 episodes, and it ended up being I watched all 7 or 8 of them. Like, oh my,
yeah,
what am I doing with my life?
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There's still like we're never going to be perfect, especially the amount
No,
that we're being pulled in by these different things. You're going to go off of your path. However, another thing, like as coming from a perfectionist, I want to always be mindful of what I'm saying, but success is never a straight line. You're going to go off to the side. You're going to go backwards several times. Like it's going to look like, a toddler drawing a picture when
hmm
you're done with it. Like you don't want to complete, I'm not saying like you just want to constantly let yourself off the hook, but you do have to give yourself some grace.
yeah, no, and that's a good point with the whole fact that it's just being mindful of it. Now, if you're mindful of it, because we can really get into a zombie mode where you're not thinking and it's just autopilot. Like I see some people, and I'm one myself. I'm on YouTube, and it's just like they have it set up like it's a slot machine. So you're pushing the button and you're hoping to hit 777s, and just like YouTube or whatever it is, and you're just flipping through all of the videos. You're hoping to catch one, and then you're like, I've been doing this for 15 minutes now. What the? So to be mindful and catch yourself when you do that, and that's already progress right there, where you're not
Yeah.
falling into that autopilot of you're doing things and you're doing it just out of reaction, you're doing it out of just habit, and you're not mindful of what you're doing. And I like this whole the overarching view of where you're coming from, just the fact of coming back to self and being present, being in the moment, and what meditation has done for you. So throughout these 5 years of you meditating and putting it into practice, has it been like a consistent daily thing?
So as much as I can, yeah, there's definitely days where I don't get to it. And it's just recognizing that and being cognizant of that and not letting myself. It's just like with exercise. There's going to be days where,
Yeah.
as far as meditation, there aren't days that I can't do it. Like, as with exercise, sometimes you're just like, if I go in there, I'm going to injure myself today. But there's definitely days I've let it lapse and not do it. It's just remembering to build up another streak, just like with exercise, like especially getting started. It's like just start a streak and try to keep it going for as long as possible.
It's been very beneficial for you.
Right. So you talk about that doom scrolling thing. Some of the things that I've noticed that I'm better at, and I attribute it to meditation, is being able to recognize both when you have veered off the road of your goals of some sort. I don't want to get in a little TMI here, but people getting on their phone on the toilet, like remembering like, hey, I'm here to do a different job.
Oh,
I'm not
right.
here like, this is the second YouTube video that I've started. Catching yourself when you're doing something that's not beneficial to you in whatever capacity. And also, a tip that I picked up was every time that you notice that you've noticed something that you're doing and you correct that action, remembering to kind of say to yourself a little bit, like give yourself a little bit of a, like, hey, I noticed that, and I made changes because of that. Recognizing those little wins is super important. But to your question, yeah, it's been semi consistent. I would, there's been stretches where I, get, have a depressive episode and I just can't meditate. I would start to meditate and I would ruminate instead. But I always get back to it because, like I said, it has been able, when I am doing both meditation and going to therapy, it almost cements everything that they say. I'm able to be more cognizant of what thoughts are crossing my mind and recognizing which ones are helpful and which ones are not. And I'm trying to think of some good tips on how to remain consistent with it, but it's definitely difficult in the present day life of all of us, I'm sure. One of them that I have noticed is right before I go to bed, I try to put on Netflix every freaking night. I've noticed that about myself. Right before I go to bed, I just want to get one more good episode of Sopranos or something. I will tell myself, yeah, we can do that if you meditate first. It is finding something to reward yourself with for doing beneficial things for yourself has been super helpful for me.
That's a good one. Yeah. That was something that came to mind when you spoke about being mindful, how meditation has helped you with that, to be mindful and to be aware, to be conscious of what you're doing and to catch yourself sometimes. And that's something that's huge for somebody who is going into a dark hole with thoughts, with negativity. And now, if you continue to entertain those thoughts, you just keep spiraling further and further and further into that endless, endless dark pit. But if you catch yourself and you're conscious of it, you can start to feed yourself something that's the complete opposite. You can start to
Mm-hmm.
maybe just take note of what you do have, that extra breath of life that you do have, to maybe do something different. The people around you that are still around you and they love you for who you are and the support that you have, whatever it is, it could be the smallest or tallest of things. How good the coffee is tasting, or how nice the sun feels today. But you catch yourself and you can start going in a different direction instead of just being pulled deeper and deeper and deeper into that dark hole till it gets to the point where it's just completely crippling and you just lock yourself in a room, or worst case scenario, who knows what can happen. But yeah, that's a strong point right there, to the fact that you're able to be mindful and how much that can really benefit somebody during those times, of a crisis, or when things just seem to be slipping away at a fast and rapid pace. So you have the therapy, you have the meditation, and also you said that you want to get your certification so you could start leading meditation. Do you want to do that when you go ahead and take it in that direction? Do you want to do it in person, or this is something maybe you think you can do online, or probably both?
Probably both. I would love to do it in person. There's just something about that.
Like group meditation or one-on-ones?
Both. Yeah, I would love to do it in person though, whether one and one, because I definitely feel like some people would prefer that. However, something that I just learned a few weeks ago through one of our lectures was there is something to group meditation, and what they are finding is that it might be tied to the magnetic field that our heart generates. So your heart actually has a magnetic field that, and I've heard different numbers, but the one that I trust most is that it extends 3 feet from your body. However, whenever everyone is in a group, there's also a sleeping study that I found one time that people sleep better with a partner or at least a pet in the same room. Their breaths will start to synchronize. So there's definitely something about being around other people that is beneficial. And especially for myself, like if I am completely spiraling out of control and I can't get myself to be more mentally stable, I reach out to people and we hang out, whether it's I've ran errands with people or, we just sit down and binge Netflix together. Getting around another person has always helped me. So I would love to try to do at least part of it in person. However, I know in the day that we live in, it would be a death sentence to not likely offer that online. So offering it both in person and online would probably be the direction I head.
Yeah. No, that would be great. That would be great. And now talking with you and hearing more about it, this is because like I said, when I was taking that mindfulness course, and I was making it a practice, and I was pretty consistent about it, meditating. I can't say that I've been as consistent, but I do make it a point nowadays to just to allot myself some time where it's just me. And whether it's going to and from work, the route that I take, or even a little bit before I go to bed, or when I wake up or something, whatever it may be. And even this breath work that I came across, this holotropic breathing, or just breath work in general. But there's a lot of different rhythmic breaths, and the holding your breath retention and that kind of thing. Even 10 minutes, 15 minutes of it, but that has put me in a good place the last few times that I've tried it. In these last 2 weeks, that's something that I've been experimenting with. But the meditation is something that now, speaking with you, hearing more about it, and especially how much you enjoy it and how passionate you are about it, especially because it's something that helped you out. I mean, you were in a dark place, you were in a bad place, desperate, and this is something that was that lifeline for you. So it was good to hear this, because now I want to go ahead and throw this back in my tool bag and make make more use of it, because like you said, we're living in an age, or we both said this is the age of distractions, and it really would be beneficial for all of us if we just allow ourselves some time to be by ourselves, away from all the white noise, all the distraction, all the fuzz.
Yeah, and there's you can look up as well. There's several studies on meditation and how there's actual physical benefits within the body. Like I wrote down some before the we started recording, but they have seen that meditating over a stretch of time, I can't remember what the time is, you can find the studies online, had rebuilt neural pathways and reduced inflammation in people's central nervous systems. There's increased levels of oxytocin, melatonin, serotonin, GABA, and endorphins, while lowering several of the bad chemical compound, quote unquote, bad chemical compounds in our body. So that's what really reinforced my belief that it was helping me out and that I should
Wow.
look into it further. And just remembering those things and also understanding that it's just a small portion of our day. That's kind of what has cemented my practice.
A few minutes out the day. You said 12 minutes. Just 12 minutes a day has been proven to, I mean, that's if you think about it in
Mhm.
relation to watching TV or something, that's just a few commercials.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Still, we find ways to avoid it.
But so the science is actually, yeah, you know what? I've heard a lot of neuroscientists and a lot of people in the medical field that they've had studies even just where they were able to read the brain waves of, let's say, monks or some any group of people who practice this habitually, and the benefits, and even to be able to read it. So the science is definitely catching up to it. This is something that's been this is an old, old practice. It's been around
Yeah.
for ages,
Yeah.
millennia.
They, the teacher of my course is also a neuroscientist, and she performed a study, and it was with adolescents who had been abused, and they were trying to, I think it was the judge, I forget how the story goes, but somebody thankfully throughout the process was trying to figure out how to make it easier for them to testify and not be traumatized throughout the court process and things like that. And so she sat down, they had hired her to sit down with these kids, and she conducted a study throughout and found that they had lower levels of cortisol. They reported less mental struggles throughout the whole ordeal. So yeah, the science is definitely catching up to it. Like the fact that it regrows neural pathways is what got me, because when you do a brain scan of somebody who has major depressive disorder like I do, like our brains are actually look different than a normal brain. There's like a smaller prefrontal cortex, I believe, and you can actually see physical changes in the brain as you meditate if you continue to get brain scans. But they do that for us, through these studies, but as you go along, you'll notice actual physical changes in the brain, and that blows my mind.
That's powerful. It's like one of those. Well, I can't say best kept secrets now because it seems like there's a lot of things now that people are exploring that they weren't before. The alternative ways to get well rather than just depend on a medication or to, there's a quick fix for everything, but just a lot of different ways that people are exploring that to get well, to deal with the anxieties, the fears, the worries, and the stresses of modern life. So this is something that a lot more people are open to, and a lot of people are seeing the benefits of it, such as yourself. And now the course that you're taking, you're currently still taking the course, or you're almost wrapped up with
Yeah,
it?
I'm still taking it. It's 150 hours of both lectures. The part I'm on now is I'm finally actually starting to record meditations that I'm leading, and I submit them in to be critiqued and things. There's 3 different sections and then a community service aspect to it at the very end, and I'm just wrapping up the second section. So I have another section to go, and then I think it's 25 hours of community service in which I offer, I can't remember what the syllabus said. What I'm doing for it is I'm actually going to go to an organization called NAMI, which is the Alliance for Mental Illness in our area, and I'm going to offer meditations for free to people who come in there. That place is they hold peer support groups, and other resources for people struggling with mental health. And I actually took part in that in the early goings of when I wasn't able to get a therapist in the area. I was doing peer support groups there, so it's going to mean a lot to me to be able to offer people some help there and kind of give back to a place that helped me out.
Since you've been taking the course and then throughout the years, have you been meditating? Are there people that you kind of guide or teach or mentor in a way with that?
Not
Not
yet.
yet. Okay, yeah, it's getting there.
I don't know. It's part of that negative perspective I have on myself, I guess. Like, I feel like until I get that piece of paper that I probably shouldn't do it.
Hmm.
Even recording the meditations I'm doing right now, it's just kind of like a podcast right now. I record myself in my own sessions to submit them. I don't have anybody that I'm actually talking to, just myself. But yeah, once I get that certificate, I'll feel a little bit better about leading a meditation.
Hmm. No, I mean, you're taking the steps in the right direction. And even with that, if anything, you're putting in the repetition and the practice, and you become more comfortable with it, confident with it. And then when it's finally time, and then you have people, because I'm sure, especially with this facility that you plan on reaching out to and giving back to, there's going to be people there that in need. And I've heard that there's been a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists that they just been overbooked, and there's a big need right now for people to provide a service that can help people with different struggles that they may be going through. Meditation seems like that's going to be something that this is going to be a great addition and a very very useful tool for a lot of people. There is no side effects. There's no negative side effects.
Only known side effect or potential negative side effect of this is, from what I understand, I mean, there's some people that definitely are saying, like, there is no side effect. However, people have reported that they somehow sink more into their thoughts, they ruminate more or something like that. So it's I have a hard time believing that that's entirely centered on the meditation aspect of it, because I definitely ruminate. And there's definitely been reports of I know that waking up app that I spoke about earlier, when he started adding like a podcast style element to it. He calls it the theory section, and he'll bring in different meditation leaders or just different people in that world. There was a group that came on to talk about the dark side of meditation, but from what I could gather, it was they ruminated more. They got stuck in thought loops and things like that. That's why I kind of feel like it's super important to have, if not a therapist, like go to some peer support groups where you can talk about whatever it is that you seem to be ruminating on. And when you're talking about, yeah, the therapists need help. So that's how I ended up at NAMI, which I think I misspoke earlier. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I stumbled across them because, especially during COVID, the two biggest places that my insurance worked with in the area were booked up for months. I called, say it was March. They were telling me that it would be September or October before I could get my initial
Yeah.
appointment. And so I started to panic. And once things opened back up, and two, like every time if there was a therapist you weren't working well with and you needed to switch, you were right back in that on that wait list. And so at some point I just kind of looked around and I found NAMI, and they had a couple different peer support groups that were weekly, open weekly. And if you have something like that in your area, I can't recommend it enough. I'll never forget, there was a guy that was attending that support group who was homeless, and he had survived a serial killer, and it had affected him so much that he became homeless, and he was showing up every day. I asked him, where he was staying, and he was actually living out of a car wash. During the day when people were using it, he would walk, go somewhere. he would come out to NAMI, and whenever it was about time to close up, the owner was letting him go inside the car wash before he closed it. But he would be stuck in there until the next morning when the owner would open back up. And to have him come in there, that was another person I looked at and I was like, if he can do this, I damn well better be able to do this. Like, this guy is showing up and working on himself at the absolute lowest point in his life. And yet, like, he would sit there and listen to everyone else air their issues, and he almost always had something to say at the end of it that was super insightful, or would lift your spirits. And there was other people in there, like I remember there was this elderly couple that would come in, and they brought him like an old style radio. They brought him a radio to have in there with them. They were like, so you have something to do, overnight or whatever. And I remember him also, he had he had this dream that someday he was going to print t-shirts with a smiley face on the front of it. Cause he was like, man, people just don't smile anymore. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, it's silly, but at the same time, I was like, that is such a wholesome thing. Like, it warmed my heart every time I saw him in there. But yeah, it all started out like from what I was told is that he showed up one day and he was just asking for something to eat. And so the peer support group leader always brought him like a little milk box like you used to get at school. He'd bring him a little milk jug and then a packet of oatmeal every morning.
Mm-hmm.
That place, man, I know that especially in our area, if anybody in my area is listening to this, I know our local NAMI, like if you go into the reviews, like it gets a bad rap. And I feel like, especially having been there, like the majority of it, I think, is that there are a lot of homeless that show up there, or at least they did. And they would come in, and I just like, man, if you're so stuck on like where people are in their life, like I do understand what they're saying. Like when I first showed up out there and there was a whole bunch of homeless people like out front, I was like, oh, they're gonna dominate the group or whatever, but they didn't. That is such a negative perspective of a person. Especially, like I said, when I moved here, I was washing cars for $8 an hour. I will never forget what changed my perspective on the homeless was I did not have enough money to gas up to get home from my job one day. And I pulled into a come and go with like the little thing that tells you how many miles you have till empty was on 0. And so I'm like, I pull in and I don't have $1 in my bank account. And so I walked over to the closest person who was filling up and I was like, dude, do you have $5 so I can put a gallon of gas or whatever, 2 gallons of gas in my car just so I can get home? Nobody would do it. And so at some point I kind of sheepishly walk up to the front of the building and I'm just standing there trying to catch everybody that comes in and out. And before I know it, the manager of that gas station comes out and is like, hey, I'm going to need you to leave because people are complaining. You're asking for money. I was like, I can't leave. I'm like, that's my car over there at the pump and it will probably run out of gas as soon as I start it. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to call the police. We're not going to, file against you or whatever it is. Like, we don't know what to do. Like, people are complaining. I was like, man, you've got to be kidding me. Like, no way. But finally, somebody overheard that. And they walked up to her, gave her a 20 and was like, just put it on his pump. Like, that's insane to me. And I will never forget that day. Like I have given money to the homeless when I did not have it because of that time. Like it is no wonder. Like when you walk around, I have an interview on my podcast with a former homeless person and she broke my heart. She was like, people will not acknowledge you. They will not look in your direction for fear of me asking for money or whatever it is. Like, they don't want to see somebody that looks like that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that does to somebody's psyche.
Yeah. Some of them, they can feel invisible. They're being walked over, stepped over, pushed aside for a lot of different reasons. You really never know what somebody has been through, what someone has went through, and the misfortune that has happened to put them in that situation. And yeah, to treat people with the same kind of dignity or respect you would wish someone to do for you.
Exactly. Yeah, it's I thought about this the other day when I was in elementary school. I had the fortune of having, man, I wish I remembered his first name, but my principal's name was Mr. Frazee. And man, I gave that guy hell when I was in elementary school. I was always the class clown, so I was in his office nonstop. But we started every day. He had a poster with a golden rule on it. And every morning before we went to class, he made us read that out loud. And it was, do unto others as you would have done unto you. And
The golden rule.
my goodness, like, I've never heard anybody else say that in my entire life other than, I've read it in the Bible before. But I am so thankful for that, man, because that has served me well throughout my life. And I'm thankful that that's a part of me.
Yeah, I mean, if man or woman were to apply that to their life, then that would eliminate almost the majority of the transgressions and the wrongdoings that are going on, because a lot of it is self-inflicted, and we're doing this to ourselves, even though you feel as if you're hurting somebody else or you're taking from somebody else, but ultimately you're also in the process hurting yourself. Yeah, that is something that I really try to meditate on. Do unto others as I would want somebody else to do to me, and just to treat them with the same kind of dignity and respect that I would wish that would be afforded to me. So yeah, definitely. I agree. And Derek, I'm just thankful that you were flexible. You hung around, stuck around, and we were able to do this, because it was great to hear some of your journey, your experiences in life, the not just the down times, but how you were able to turn that upward slope and move in a better direction for your daughter, for yourself, and also now with what you plan to do with paying this forward now, and what has helped you along the way with the meditation, but to bring that to people who may be in need, and who may find it very beneficial for their situation, their mental health, whatever they're struggling with. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of benefits to it. Science is catching up to the fact that there's a lot of things that this can do for somebody, not just physically, for one, also mentally, emotionally, spiritually. This is a very good tool, practice. We can all do it. We can all afford 12 minutes a day. and and why not take a stab at it and see if it works, and it's give it an honest effort. What have
Yeah.
you got to lose?
Yeah, for sure.
Derek, I know you have your podcast, you have the website that's tied to your podcast, correct?
Yeah. So the podcast is called Show My Scars.
Take it day by day, and feel the emotions and move through them, because the more you try and keep that pushed down, the worse it's going to be on yourself. So try and feel them and just try and move on,
If you see that man at the liquor store begging for your change, like it says in that song, ask him what happened. Ask him how his day is. Maybe you're the only person that acknowledges him that day.
There's not a family on earth that I haven't met that when I share my story, they say my uncle or my dad or me, myself, struggles with depression and anxiety, and it's turned into, I deal with that through alcoholism. And I'm like, then let's talk. I don't have the answers, but I want to talk to you and share what I know.
Media literacy is the ability to apply critical thinking skills to the mass media. And a lot of people like to complain about it, but then when you kind of probe into what they're complaining about, you realize they don't really even understand what they're watching and reading.
One of the things I try to do is just normalize conversations, not put a label on someone right away, because I know what labels people typically research, or they run with that label and they cannot see themselves outside of that thing that they've been identified as.
All of the research consistently over the years has said that when we do engage with someone on a conflict situation that we end up with a stronger relationship with that person on the other side.
It should be available on every podcasting app that's out there. But you can also, if not, if you can't find it, you can go to showmyscars.com, and all my episodes are hosted there as well. If you're having trouble finding it on one of your apps, I also have a button that you can click that says listen now, and it should bring up Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, and Apple Music links directly to the show on those apps. Yeah, and I'm also, you can find me at facebook.com/showmyscars. That's where I post the episodes, let you know that they come out. Same as you, it's bi-weekly. So I think I just had an episode come out last Friday, the 3rd. No, we are not. It is not
Almost.
Friday. The February 7th. I think I had a show come out, so the next one won't come out until not this Friday, but the next. So
Okay, so you've been good with the scheduling and the posting, pretty consistent with it. Yeah.
Yep. Every 2 weeks. I think I only missed one due to my death in the family. Other than that, it's been coming out every 2 weeks. So I do talk similar to yours. I bring on. I've had mental health professionals. I've had people just like myself that just has the lived life experience. So I've had. I had my aunt that I was talking about earlier. She's that first episode. I kind of wanted to open it up, let people know, like, this is my story. Here's how this is all coming about type thing. I've had, a recovered alcoholic on, that former homeless person who now she actually works in a nonprofit helping out homeless people. So that was an amazing story. Super thankful for her. And I've had therapists on. So it's just like a mixed bag of guests that come on. Just anybody that can offer, interesting perspectives to help us live a more mentally stable life. That's the goal.
Right on. That's a beautiful thing. I like to hear that. I'm going to have to check it out, and I'm going to leave the information in the show notes so anybody listening, they have access to it. They can hear more of what you're doing. They can check out more of what you're doing, and even keep in contact with you when you do decide to have this meditation, this guiding meditation, and when that gets going, I'm sure it's going to be a great thing, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to benefit from it. It's just, once you get around to it, but that's cool. That's great. That's great to hear that you're actually giving back, and then you're going back to a place that you already have some kind of a relationship with, and keeping it close to home in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to giving back to NAMI was a huge thing for me. The executive director, I had her on a couple episodes ago. I definitely encourage people to check out her story. She suffered from agoraphobia and couldn't leave her house. And now she's the executive director of a nonprofit in the mental health world. So that quite the transformation. Wow. Yeah, after connecting with her, I talked to her and let her know what was going on with me. And it was, especially in our area, it's a huge, huge thing. So that my grandfather passed away a few months ago, something that stuck with me and let me know I need to keep things close to home was the coroner as a tidbit that he thought would help us get through that time. He let us know, like, well, he lived a good life. Did you know that the average age of heart attack in this area it was like mid 40s. I was like, holy smokes. I was like, that can't be all.
Wow.
That can't just be all of, what they're eating or what they're doing. Like, part of that has to be mental health as well, mental health related, because, myself, like, I'm fairly healthy, when they look at me and, as far as a physical person, there's not a whole lot wrong with me. And yet I suffer from high blood pressure, and what do they always tell you? Like, keep your stress under check. Like, yeah. And so, yeah, it definitely, I was like, oh, if this is the average age of heart attack in my area, like, and two, knowing like the mental health resources that were there when I first started, there's definitely a need for help in the Springfield, Missouri area for sure.
Yeah, there is a need, and you're feeling that need. thank you again for your time, your words, your story, and some of those tools and the ingredients that helped you and how you were able to share that with myself and everybody listening. And we can all take from it what we think will be resourceful and valuable. And yeah, everybody, like we were saying earlier, if we allow ourselves that time to be with ourselves, to get in touch with ourselves, to be mindful, to be aware, to be conscious of what we're doing, and of course to treat other people the way that we would want to be treated. If you have any other words or anything else you'd like to leave off with before we wrap it up, feel free.
I would just say the phrase that has helped me time and time again, especially with my meditation. I think it was Sam Harris said, like, begin again. That's all that you have to do with meditation. When a thought comes in and you find that you have stopped concentrating on your breath or whatever was the focus of your attention, just begin again. But I have extended that to, the things that I've had to overcome in my life. Just begin again. That's really all that you can do. So if you can remember that phrase, you can overcome any of the obstacles in your life.
That's right. Every day is a new day for the wise man. As long as we still have breath in our lungs, and we can create change, create new possibilities, and actualize new potentials.
Absolutely.
All the best to you, your daughter, all the works that you have going on, and the endeavors that you plan to pursue.
I appreciate that.
I hope you all enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. It was great to have Derek on. The name of his podcast, again, you heard a snippet of it. I added a trailer in between the conversation. Show My Scars is the name of Derek's podcast, and he's doing a real good deed over there. He talks about mental health. He talks about meditation, how it's helped him, the benefits of it. But you can check out the link and see what he has going on over there. Derek, once again, thank you for taking time out of your day, for being vulnerable, for sharing some personal stuff about what you went through, your losses, some of your failures, your feelings, opening up, being honest, transparent to complete strangers, but just so maybe there's somebody out there that can benefit from your story, and to see that if you were able to do it, so can I, and to maybe look into and try out meditation, see what it does. But I like the fact that you touched on just getting back to self, getting grounded, spending time with self, getting away from distractions. That's great, because that's something that I'm really embracing and working on myself. And again, I have to commend you and tip my hat off. I've got to give you your respect. Everything that you worked for, your dream job, everything that you put into it, you dropped it for the simple fact of you wanting to be closer to your daughter, to help raise her, to help support her, to be there for her. And that right there shows the type of character and the type of man that you are. Salute, my friend. May you and your daughter continue to grow together, create that loving bond that is special, that is only what a father and daughter could enjoy. Though we were strangers before the conversation, but I'm happy that you're in a better place. I'm happy you've found a way to reduce your anxiety, to help with your depression, and to get well for not just yourself, but for your daughter, and then for others as you pay it forward, moving into this meditation and creating a space where people can meditate, where people can be guided and can enjoy the benefits that meditation, with being with self, with being away from distractions, can provide to each one of us. So again, if anybody is interested in learning more about meditation or what Derek offers, even if you might even be in the area, check him out. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear from you. Derek, you are a giant amongst us. And also a big thank you to all of you listening. Wherever you're listening from, however you're listening to the show, appreciate you each and every time checking in with us and spending some of your day with us. If you want to reach out, if you want to let us know where you're listening from, how you're listening to the show, YouTube, Reddit, you have the website, you have the email address. You can say hi, how's it going, small talk, shoot a line, send some warm words, your thoughts, whatever it is. It's always great to hear back from you all. I want to wish you a great rest of the week. You guys be safe out there. Smile to a stranger. Be the change that you wish to see. Spend a little bit of time with yourself, away from the chatter, away from the white noise, away from the buzz, and just be. It's time to get back to who we are. It's time to get back to self. Come back home. Because if we're not careful with the way things are going and how fast they're moving, we can get lost in the shuffle. But ultimately, the choice is ours. We're going to catch up and do this again real soon. Before I wrap it up, I've got to remind you, if you would like to be a part of the show and share your story, or even a story of someone in your life that has impacted you in a positive way, you can always reach out to us via email. We'd be happy to connect. Until next time, and very soon. Peace.
I'm looking for a sign to know I'm on the right road. Ain't seen no sign since